Well, South Korea's new president, Moon Jae-in, meets with President Trump at the White House for the first time this week amid growing tensions about their neighbor to the north. Just one of the many serious issues that are bound to come up. VOA's Bill Gallo takes a look at what we can expect when the two leaders meet in Washington.
The first meeting between Donald Trump and Moon Jae-in has plenty of potential areas of friction. During the campaign, Trump regularly accused Seoul of ripping off the U.S. on trade and threatened to withdraw U.S. troops from South Korea. At one point, Trump suggested he'd have North Korean leader Kim Jong-un assassinated, a threat he since walked back. More recently, Trump has said he'd be willing to meet Kim face-to-face under the right circumstances. Still, his approach to the North stands in stark contrast to that of Moon, a liberal human rights lawyer who advocates engagement with Pyongyang. But the two leaders' strategies aren't as contradictory as they may seem, according to Gary Seymour, an Obama White House official speaking via Skype.
Well, Trump has said many different things about North Korea, but I think the overall strategy is one of pressure to create conditions for engagement. And that's something that President Moon has actually endorsed.
Disagreements could also arise over the deployment of the THAAD U.S. anti-ballistic missile system in South Korea.
And joining us now to discuss the South Korean president's first visit to the White House, I'm joined here in Washington by VOA Central News reporter William Gallo, who filed that story for us, along with our South Korea expert, Abbey Lee, with VOA's English service. I thank you both for joining us. So, Bill Gallo, thank you for that report. So, these two leaders are meeting as we go to air Friday morning. Obviously, North Korea very high on the agenda. Are you seeing any areas of differences or agreement when these two meet?
Well, they do have areas of disagreement, but I think the areas of disagreement are mainly over tactics rather than strategy. I mean, both leaders obviously want to resume talks. They want to implement some sort of freeze on North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. But I think the question mainly is when to start those talks. President Moon seems to want to start them very quickly, actually, and make more concessions right away. Whereas Trump, I don't think, is as committed to starting this right away. He sort of wants to maximize pressure on Kim Jong-un before those talks begin.
So you're suggesting the issue is how they approach this issue,
right? And
strategically.
It's very different. I mean, Moon is, as I mentioned in the TV piece, a liberal human rights lawyer. He doesn't speak with such, I don't know how you can say it, he's not as acerbic whenever he talks about this issue. Trump, meanwhile, really has been all over the place on this issue, especially during the campaign whenever he felt a little more free to talk. As I mentioned, he suggested that he would have China assassinate Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, really.
Of course, he's walked that back. He's now said that he would be willing to have talks with them under the right conditions. Of course, the relations with the North have even, deteriorated worse, so that doesn't look likely. But it's a massive difference as far as how they talk about North Korea, I would say.
And G, as Bill mentioned, there's a big difference here between Moon Jae-in and his predecessor, longtime conservative. We're talking about a progressive leader for the South Korean country. How does he differ in terms of previous administrations?
Just like Bill said, very different because I guess if Park Geun-hye was still in power, she would have more in common on North Korea approach with President Trump. But because Moon Jae-in is very different from his predecessor, and he actually protested against Park Geun-hye's father, former President Park Chung-hee, so he has a more lenient strategy toward North Korea.
I see. So both leaders met Thursday night for a formal dinner along with their spouses. How did that dinner meeting go? Do you see any chemistry there between these two leaders? Are they able to work together?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to note that South Korean media focus a lot on the 4-second handshake. So they're doing all these little graphics and the countdowns of the handshakes between Trump and Abbey, Trump and Xi Jinping, and Trump and President Moon. And they say, 4 seconds, it wasn't aggressive, it was very cordial, and they seem to like it a lot.
Bill, a lot of times it's those superficial details that the media pays attention to before we even talk about some of the hard issues that need to be addressed, correct?
Right. I mean, it's funny to actually see how often handshakes and things like this are discussed.
Because Donald Trump made it a thing.
It's definitely a thing. I mean, this is not something that only the media are focusing on. Whenever Trump met the French leader recently, there was an awkward handshake, and then the French President Macron actually then discussed this. Yes, this is something I did intentionally because I want to let him know I'm not going to give it.
But I think the leaders have caught on, right? I mean, Justin Trudeau has his own way of sort of avoiding that kind of a right?
It seems shallow, but there's a little more substance there than you might think.
Right, but it says a lot about these leaders. But gee, I mean, getting back into some serious matters, this meeting between these two leaders is bound to be somewhat tricky because any kind of agreement they reach is going to include, in some fashion, China. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. And South Korea being a very dependent on international trade, and they're going to talk about...
And China is their largest trading partner, correct?
That's correct. And U.S. is South Korea's strongest ally. So that puts kind of Korea in a very difficult position because they have to renegotiate, it seems like, with the U.S. about the KORUS FTA, the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. So it'll be interesting how that plays out between U.S. and South Korea when it comes to Korea's relationship with China as well.
And when it comes to the THAAD system, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System that the United States is introducing to South Korea, how does China factor into whatever decision the South Korean president makes on that?
Well, they've put an enormous amount of pressure on South Korea to actually, halt the deployment of this anti-ballistic missile system. And I think the view here in Washington, a lot of people think that South Korea sort of gave in to that pressure. I don't know if that's the case, but that's how a lot of Trump officials view it.
Does South Korea have a choice? I mean, the United States is also a big trading partner and a big defense partner, right?
Well, the thing is, it was already agreed that the South Korea will provide real estate and the U.S. will deploy the defense system in South Korea.
That's already an agreement in place, and that's not bound to change at all, right?
Well, except that Mr. Trump has said that South Korea should pay for some of the defense costs. So President Moon has to decide whether he wants to kind of take into the consideration that it's a new administration and he wants to make sure that the countries that U.S. provides defense support to will, pay part of the cost. So we'll see how that goes. But the thing is, if you don't provide your allies with the responsibilities that come with being the global leader, I think it's inevitable that your leadership also in the global stage kind of diminishes significantly.
Bill, but also as you mentioned in your piece, Donald Trump was very harsh on South Korea's leaders, particularly on trade issues, particularly on the issue of North Korea. Do you think he's moderated his tone, or is he going to be forced to moderate his tone after this face-to-face?
He definitely has moderated his tone since becoming president. There's no doubt about it on South Korea. What this will look like as far as his meeting with Moon, I don't think anyone knows. White House officials were sort of ahead of this meeting playing the positive aspects of it up, saying there would be more unified messages coming out of this. But he used language to describe the relationship with South Korea in a way that really hasn't been done before, at least not recently, by U.S. presidents. So will those issues come up? I don't know.
Well, thank you both for covering this issue so closely for us. I do appreciate your help. Thank you so much, Abbey Lee and Bill Gallo. We're going to take a short break now. But when we come back, Obamacare lives to fight another day. This is The Correspondents on Voice of America.